The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.
Welcome to the Tim Heale Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to have a chat with Bethany. Bethany, if you could tell me when and where you were born, and then if you can describe what it was like where you grew up, the schools you went to, and the education that you received. Over to you.
Sure. So I was born in Fort Worth, Texas, in the United States of America in the year 1978. I grew up in Fort Worth proper, and then we moved when I was around 7 or 8 to a small town outside of Fort Worth. The schools that yes.
So what can you remember about the early days in Fort Worth? Was it like it? I've never been to Fort Worth. Is it a big city? Is it a capital city? Austin's the capital.
When I was sure, yep. So when I was growing up, Fort Worth to me felt like a big city. To be quite honest, I don't remember a lot about Fort Worth. I do remember spending a lot of time with my grandparents. My grandparents owned a business. They sold tractor tires and automobile tires to customers, and they had their own dealership. So they were quite successful back in their time. And I, as a little girl, would go to work with my grandmother when she went to Hart's Garage was the name of their business. And my grandfather, his name was Douglas, but everybody called him Mr. Hart, even though his last name was Clark. People still thought that his last name it wasn't. So they bought the business from the original owner. So I just remember a lot of time working behind my grandmother's desk. I really wasn't working. I was, they had an old, like an adding machine. She would add up receipts and I would play around with that, and spending a lot of time in the warehouse where all of the tires were stored and playing hide and go seek with my brother. So I spent a lot of time there. Yeah.
So I guess because you're doing tractor tires was a very sort of a rural type area then in Fort Worth.
It was actually the business was in a busy part of Fort Worth, but because Fort Worth is typically the surrounding area of Fort Worth, the countryside is more rural, and there's a lot of agriculture and farming. They drew a lot of clientele, but their physical location of their business was close to downtown, so pretty in the heart of the city. I don't. I went to kindergarten. I did not like kindergarten. I felt it was traumatizing. I just remember being really painfully shy. I was painfully shy. And my dad, I just remember my dad took me to my first day of school and took me to school for several weeks. And I just remember he would drop me off in the classroom and the teacher would shut the door, and it had a window that you could see out of in the door. And my dad would stand there waving at me for what seemed like, 10 minutes just to make sure that I was okay. But in the beginning, I had terrible separation anxiety, and I would just sit there and cry and want to go home immediately. So I took, I think, a bit for me to adjust. And so I don't remember too much about elementary school. My parents my parents did not get along, so they divorced when I was 10. So there was a lot of chaos at home. So yeah.
That kind of puts a damper on your life when parents split up, and it can have a devastating effect on children at that time in their lives, where from sort of the age of 7 onwards, it's really difficult, especially if you're attached to one parent more so than the other, and you end up going with the one that you're not overly attached to. So I'm hazarding a guess that you was a daddy's girl and you ended up stuck with your mother.
Yeah, that would be accurate. My dad had some mental health issues that he struggled with. He had struggled with those before he met my mother. So my mother was aware that he had mental health issues and thought that he would be able to manage them with the added stress of having a family and being the breadwinner and the stress. I think, the pressure, of wanting to measure up as a man, I think maybe didn't have a good effect on his mental health. So they divorced, and I was a daddy's girl for sure. I still am. So yeah, I at that time, I think and I don't know what it is now, but I think it's more predominantly, it's the norm to be, if the parents are divorced, the children go with the mother. So that's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it did have, it did have some definite marks.
So when you moved out of Fort Worth itself and you moved out to a suburb, what was that like?
That was honestly a little bit more challenging. That was during the years that my parents' marriage was really starting to get bad. So there was a lot of chaos at home. I do remember going to school, and the one thing that I took pleasure in at school was singing. So we didn't have choir or anything like that. It was just, I think it was in third grade, second grade, third grade. But I would play with my friends on the playground, and I would give them concerts. So I would sing to them on the playground, whatever famous song was playing on the radio at the time. And, in some ways, like, I'm just realizing this now, I think like maybe that gave me the attention that I wasn't getting at home, by singing to them on the playground. But
So
that's a big memory.
what sort of music were you singing? Was it country music or was it sort of pop music?
It was pop music. Yeah, it was pop music. I was a big fan of Madonna at the time. There was an artist named Tiffany. She was a one-hit wonder in the 80s. Huey Lewis and the News, Michael Jackson. Yeah.
So you were singing all those sort of songs. You weren't singing any sort of Dolly Parton or Shania Twain.
Yeah, I didn't really get into country music until I was older, in high school and college. Yeah.
So after your parents split up, you stayed with your mother. How was that? How did that affect you when you was going to school?
Oh, I think it had a huge impact. It drove, so we didn't have a lot of money. My mom struggled. She didn't work when she was married to my dad. That was a 10-year marriage, so she really never worked. And then she was suddenly forced to work. And I think because she had had a really tough time with my dad, she didn't feel very good about herself. So she worked a lot. We never really had a lot of money. And, I went to a school that was a little bit more affluent than what we were. My kids in my class had bigger homes than we did. They had seemed on the outside like they had more money. They had dressed better, had nicer cars, and I always kind of felt inferior. And I spent a lot of time. I got into theater and choir. I got into choir in middle school, which I don't know what you call it there, but it's there's elementary school, middle school, and then high school in the US. And so in middle school, I was 12. I got into choir.
That'll be secondary school.
Secondary school, yeah. So I got into choir, and I really took a passion for singing because I think it helped me find my voice and feel confident when I didn't really have much of a voice, in a chaotic home. And then in high school, my dad actually took me to see a play at my high school. And I remember it was the play Funny Girl. And our high school was known for having a really amazing, well-funded fine arts department. So choir productions, theater productions were state of the art. They had a lot of money to spend on choreography and fly-in instructors and lighting and sets. And I went and saw this play, and I was mesmerized. It was a musical. And I was just mesmerized. Like, oh my gosh. Like they were on stage, and it seemed like so much fun. And I told myself, I was like, I'm going to get up there. I'm going to be on stage. That's what I'm doing. And the next play that auditioned was a play called Daisy Pulls It Off. It's a British play, or it's set in the UK. And we had to all learn how to do a British accent. And I auditioned to play the bully in the play. Her name was Sybil Burlington, and she was the mean girl in the school and the bully of the play. And I got that role. And I just remember it was just so much fun to play the villain, and I think it gave me a good outlet. Because I had a lot of anger at that time in my life, and I didn't know, what to do with it. And so I really think that being in theater and learning how to be an actor gave me a big outlet.
So you enjoyed that then?
I loved it. Yes.
So how many other plays did you get involved with, or musicals?
I think I was in 2 plays and then a musical in high school. Yeah.
What was the musical?
Into the Woods.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Bit of Shakespeare. Brush up your Shakespeare. That one.
Oh, I don't think Into the Woods is Shakespeare.
Yeah.
It's
I think you find it is.
Oh, okay, probably is. It's been a long time. Yeah.
So there's lots of different scenes in that then. So did you have multiple parts, or was it just one part in one scene?
So Into the Woods, the musical, is based on different fairy tale characters. So I was Rapunzel. I played Rapunzel in that musical. Yeah.
And how did you do?
I think I did really well. I had an English teacher at the time who told me she thought that I would make a good Rapunzel when auditions were happening. And so, yeah, I think I did pretty well.
And you got the part.
And I got the part. Yes, I got the part.
How many shows did you put on to that? Was it a run, or is it just one?
It was a
one
run.
evening?
It was a run. I think we did maybe 3 weeks worth. Thursday. We did Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and a Sunday matinee. So we rehearsed for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then did a 2 or 3 week run, I believe. Yeah.
Wow, that must have been a lot of fun then. So,
Yeah.
what was the worst subject in high school for you?
Math. Easily. I was not a math. Yeah. I actually failed algebra my first year of high school. I had to go to summer school, which I don't know if you have that there. Summer school
No.
is if you don't pass a class
You get
during
take
this,
it during the summer school
you have to take
holidays.
it. Yeah. Yeah. So I had to take it during summer school, but I really struggled with math. It just didn't come easily for me.
Mm,
Writing, creative arts, that was a easier subject.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, what did you do after high school? Did you graduate with honours, or did you just graduate?
I just graduated, so I kind of struggled a bit in high school. I think my theater teacher would say that she kept me off the streets, and she did. Um, I had a hard time staying focused in like my classes. Um, I ran around with the wrong crowd. And really the only thing that kind of kept me focused was going to choir rehearsal or theater rehearsal. So I spent a lot of time there. But I didn't really apply myself academically. I just kind of did what I could to pass my classes because I had to pass my classes in order to perform and stay in the play or stay in the production. And then I think I took a semester off. I started to go to college. I went a few years and dropped out of college and moved to LA to be an actor.
So, what were you doing at college?
So I was majoring in radio, TV, film. It was an area of study that I learned how to, do TV production, film production, write and edit films, work behind the scenes at a TV studio, production studio. So my thought process was, it would give me like some experience and some education of what happens behind the scenes. And I could, get a job working, working on a film production or working on it or write a movie or create a movie. So I had a lot of really big dreams when I was in my early 20s. I did not want to stay in Texas. I knew that from a very young age. I knew that I either wanted to move to New York or LA. I did not want to get married. I did not want to have kids. I did not want to do the whole thing with a white picket fence and be like every other one of my friends and stay, live close to I wanted to get away. Like I just wanted to yeah.
So, you dropped out of college and you found yourself in LA.
Yes.
What was the first job you did in LA then?
I waitressed at a restaurant in Century City, which is just outside of Beverly Hills. Century City is also where all of the top agents are. Their offices are. So I worked as a waitress at a restaurant there. I hated it. I hated every second of it, but I had to pay the bills. Yeah.
So, So did you act like a waitress? Did
I
you
acted.
did you put on the act every day? So
I
woke up in the
had
morning,
to.
put the
I
makeup
had.
on. Today I'll be an actress.
Yeah, I was an actress trying to be a waitress. Yeah, I mean the reality is there are probably hundreds of thousands of people there that are trying to be an actor, and then you have to pay your
Yeah,
bills, and it's an expensive city.
absolutely.
So
So, did you get your big break?
I did not get a big break. I had a little bit of success. I did a couple of commercials. I did some student films, nothing that anybody would ever see publicly. I did some theater. But while I was in LA, I started practicing yoga. So I started practicing yoga when I was in college, and that really, really changed my life. It changed my mental health. It changed so many things about myself. And when I moved to LA, I was, it's a stressful city. There's lots of people, there's lots of traffic. I struggled a bit for a while. So I started practicing yoga there, and the yoga community, there are world-renowned teachers in Los Angeles, very talented teachers. And I really took a love for the practice. And then I started teaching yoga. And when I started teaching yoga, I found even more fulfillment teaching than I did in acting. So I eventually quit acting. Yeah, because it was no longer fulfilling.
So you took up teaching people yoga. So how did you go? How did you go about that in the first place? I mean, you obviously fell in love with it and something you wanted to do. So how did you
Yeah.
get the initial training to be able to become a trainer?
So there was a studio that I practiced at, and then they offered a teacher training. So I signed up for their teacher training and began teaching. And soon after that, had a few private clients, people that attended my class and asked, "Hey, do you teach privately? Could you come to my home a few times a week and teach me privately so I don't have to drive all the way over here?" So that started, that happened. So I had a few private clients. During this time, I had a full-time job working for a law firm as their office manager. And then I knew there was more to teaching yoga than just the pose itself or correcting somebody's form. So I started researching on how to become a yoga therapist, which is more advanced and opens the door to work in hospitals, to work with trauma survivors, to work with people who suffer from anxiety, depression. And yeah, so I eventually took a yoga therapy training and became a yoga therapist.
Uh-huh. So did that start opening up a lot more doors for you? And did you stay in LA?
No, so I did not stay in LA. So I moved back to Texas. I moved back to Texas in 2012. I actually finished college in 2012, thinking that if I got my degree, that would open more doors. It did not. I took yoga therapy training in 2013, became certified, and started seeing clients privately part-time while I worked full-time. And then in 2015, I was laid off from my full-time job and decided to work for myself indefinitely. So since then, I have transitioned to online work only. And I have a program for women who have had often troubled childhoods, like myself, who've had difficulty in relationships, attracting difficult men, difficult partners who struggle to feel confident. And so I work with them on healing their trauma and attracting healthy relationships.
Ah. Now, did that come about because of the lockdown, or did you start doing the online stuff before we ever got that far?
Yeah, I started doing it before. So the lockdown wasn't really much different for me. I'd started working online exclusively with yoga therapy and my clients in 2019.
So how did you go about growing that business in the first place? What gave you the idea of doing it online before it became really popular to be online during
Right.
lockdown?
So when I moved from back home to Texas from LA, yeah, I think somewhere in my heart I just knew I was never meant to work in a 9 to 5 job. I just any job that I ever had, I just didn't like it. I just felt stifled. I felt unhappy. And, even if I was making a really great salary, I just never felt like it was the right thing for me to be doing. And I was at a bookstore one day and I saw a book by an entrepreneur, Chris Gillibo, and it was called The $100 Startup. And I was like, that's interesting. So I picked up this book and I read it, and the whole premise was how to have an online business, have location freedom, create financial freedom, work on your own schedule, and have a really amazing life doing it. So it took me several years to put that into practice, but long story short, I hired a coach and invested more money than I was comfortable with at the time to hire an expert to help me build an online business, to teach me how to market myself properly, to teach me how to run paid advertising on Facebook and YouTube, to teach me how to coach clients, to teach me how to basically all of the nuts and bolts of building a profitable online business. And yeah, that was back in 2019. I transitioned my one-to-one private clients online only, and I haven't looked back.
Ah. So how did you fund it to start with? You said you weren't overly comfortable with what you were spending. I guess it wasn't that $100 that he was
No.
the
Yeah.
professed.
So I actually had savings. So I used savings, and then I had credit cards. So savings and credit cards were my my capital at the time.
How long did it take for it to start sort of bringing in enough revenue to live?
Yeah. I would say 2 years. 2 years. I was profitable in year 2. And yeah, I was very profitable in year 2. So the first year, not so much. The first year was a lot of testing and a lot of mistakes and a lot of cleaning up the mistakes and continuing to move forward and getting resourceful and doing whatever I had to do. But I feel fortunate that I've been profitable and successful and truly am able to do what I love, work on my own schedule, work with clients who are amazing, and have the freedom that I want. Yeah.
So what advice would you give to anybody that wants to go down a similar sort of route? What would be your top tips for somebody that wants to have an online business and work for themselves, what mistakes would you recommend not making?
Well, I think that mistakes are part of the process. I think a lot of people never start because they're afraid of failure. And I think the fear of failure will keep many, many people stuck in jobs that they don't like, undercharging, selling themselves short. So the first thing that I would tell someone is that failure is 100% going to happen to you. It's part of being an entrepreneur. It's part of being a business owner. It's part of any type of dream. If you set out to follow your heart and chase your dream, you are going to be met with failure 100% of the time. And to embrace it and to not let that hold you back. One of the things a casting director once told me in Los Angeles was basically the same advice he gave to every actor. And there were hundreds of thousands of actors trying to make it. It was simple. Never, ever quit. Never, ever quit. There will be people who will give up at the first signs of failure or the fourth signs of failure or the 10th signs of failure, and they'll quit and they'll say it's too much. But if you just keep going, your success is inevitable. So persistence pays off. Believing in yourself, there will be dark nights of the soul. Believing in yourself is critical. Even when you feel like quitting, you'll feel like quitting a lot. You just have to keep going and remember why. Why are you chasing that dream? Why are you doing that?
So where do you see yourself going from now? What's your long-term goals?
So my long-term goals, my long-term goal is to raise a lot of awareness for domestic violence survivors and to change how that's handled here in the United States and probably abroad as well. A lot of domestic violence shelters and centers, focus on getting the client into a job, into safe housing, into getting her life stable, but they don't really address the trauma aspect of that. And a lot of these women will leave that abusive relationship and then a few years later get into another abusive relationship or another abusive relationship, and they haven't really learned how to change their psychology deep enough to stop that pattern. So that's my long-term goal, is to change the landscape of how domestic violence is treated here, and then how what counts as domestic violence. So a lot of times in the United States, you cannot file. We have a protective order or a restraining order that allows a partner to, it's like a legal order that, it's against the law if your partner comes close to you. Well, in order to obtain a protective order or restraining order, in some states, you have to be physically assaulted by your partner. And, I talk to a lot of people that they haven't yet been physically assaulted by their partner, but their partner stalks them after work, or their partner sends them 40 phone messages or 40 text messages in an hour. So these are not physical assaults, but in the court system, it doesn't warrant obtaining a protective order. And unfortunately, I'm sure, as you know, in the news here, there's a lot of gun violence. And, a lot of times the protective order can't, it takes somebody, unfortunately, resorting to gun violence against their partner. And sometimes it's too late to get that protective order. So my goal is to really advocate and change the landscape of domestic violence. I would like to serve as many women as possible with my work, whether that's writing a book, whether that's speaking, whether that's having a more accessible program that, people can purchase online. Yeah, so those are my long-term goals. I would like to build out my company a little bit more, have a more robust team, and serving more women every year in my work.
Because I guess that physical violence is one thing, but more often than not, it's the mental violence that really does affect more women than it does the physical side of it. I mean, you get slapped around a bit, and that's one thing, but the constant of the psychological effects on people, that's where the real damage is done, and you can't see the mental damage that causes, and until there's a change in the law where they see that mental side of it, then that's when that needs to change. And I think you're doing a fantastic job along those lines.
Thank you. Yeah, I do feel like the emotional abuse, the mental or psychological abuse is really the silent killer. And there's been a lot of public cases here in the United States where a partner kills his spouse, or she kills her spouse, and the gun violence at that point, or that level of domestic assault is like the final point. Like, there's years of emotional and psychological abuse before it got to that point. And a lot of people leave before it ever gets physical, but then they suffer for many years after that from the trauma. They have high blood pressure, they have stomach IBS, IBD, ulcers. They, I've worked with people who have had cancer. There's a lot of that physical stress, that emotional and psychological abuse can create, physical complications, and it holds people back in life. They don't enjoy their lives. They don't take risks. They're just existing, but they're not really living.
Yeah, and I guess and until we could get that sort of side of things sorted out, then it's just going to go on. Maybe it's something that needs to be taught at an early age. Maybe it comes right from kindergarten to show that it's not right to abuse somebody, and maybe that's an angle you could look at.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I think an awful lot stems from early years of people's upbringing, seeing domestic violence in the home. Then that manifests itself in the individual growing up, and then when they find themselves getting married and stuff like that, they think it's okay to carry on like their parents did. And I think that's where some sort of education needs to come across, and a major campaign possibly showing that it's not okay to be violent towards anybody.
Absolutely. And I really feel like if that was taught earlier on, I think that would even improve the rate of school gun violence that we have here in the United States, because a lot of these school shooters come from an unhealthy childhood. They come from childhood trauma. They came from a broken home. They never got their needs met. And then that festers in their psychology until they believe that they have to do something so drastic to gain attention. So yeah, I do believe deeper teaching on nonviolence and what's okay and what's not okay is definitely warranted. Yeah.
Sorting out the right from the wrong, right from the word go, really. And maybe a start of that is change some of your gun laws over there, because we've seen it over here. It's they've had a couple of really big incidents recently that have hit the world stage.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I still feel, there's part of me that feels like, because, the United States was kind of founded by separating from Great Britain and separating, there's this like outlaw mentality. We had this outlaw mentality, when we took
That's
land
probably where
away
you
from
went wrong then.
Yes.
Perhaps you should have stuck with us then. You might have done slightly better off.
I know. So I still feel that there's this like cultural outlaw thing that's kind of like under the mainstream current. So yeah, historical, yeah.
Well, I think we'll draw a line there, Bethany.
Thank you. Yeah.
I've enjoyed this little chat.
Yes, likewise. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.